really helped us look at art and religion together, and culture and religion together, and to sort of try to tease out those relationships in museum installations, which is what we did for a decade over at Mobile. He's very well published. Some of his most recent books include From the Holy Land to Graceland, Sacred and Stolen, Confessions of a Museum Director, one of my favorites, and The Holy Shroud, a brilliant hoax in the time of the Black Death. Among other accolades, Dr. Vikan was appointed by President Clinton to the Cultural Property Advisory Committee. He was honored by the French Ministry of Culture and Communications with the Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et Lettres, and was the American Association of Museum Directors representative to the Presidential Advisory Commission on the Holocaust assets in the United States.
I was a museum director. I'm going to talk about the years that I was curator, because there's nothing more privileged than being the curator and having discretion over collection and how it is shown. It's fun. It is great fun. Once you become a museum director, you bear all kinds of ancillary responsibilities. I don't know how I did it for 20 years, but I did. And so I will start by saying, in parentheses, I love your town. It's not simply that the weather is perfect, or that we had a great boat ride on these lakes, whose name I've already forgotten. But we went up and down South Park, and people are so friendly. They're so nice. They're so helpful. Maybe I look like I'm lost all the time. But it's wonderful. I'm from Minnesota. And to see that kind of warmth, it's very familiar from my younger days. Anyway, I'll get to that in just a second. The holy that I knew as a child, and I guess I'm by nature somebody who starts at the beginning. I think academics tend to be like that, because I'm at the core an academic. So I like to go back to where I started. And this is my town. And I bet none of you has ever been there. It's called Foster, Minnesota. It's nearly 300 miles northwest of Minneapolis. In my day, it was populated by mostly first-generation Norwegians and Swedes. Lived off the farming community on the outside. My father ran the weekly newspaper for 50 years. I was British. He took that photograph in 1957 from the Piper Cub airplane. If we were to take that same photo this year, the town will look exactly the same. The bodies are different, the buildings are the same. Sort of sweet. Anyway, on the block where we lived, not 120 steps from our front door, was the church. I was the youngest of a family of 5, and we were all Lutherans. Most everybody in town was Lutheran. How you can have a town of 1,500 people with 5 Lutheran churches? You still get But Hope was the biggest one, and I assumed that because it was the biggest one, it had to be the best one. And I went to Hope Church, and what was the holy that I encountered at Hope Church? There's a point to what I'm saying here right now. At the far end of the altar, at the far end of the sanctuary, on the altar, was this enormous painted wooden statue. It was of Christ. And for years, I had no idea that actually it wasn't made just for my church. It wasn't. It was made in 1836 by a Danish guy named Thorvaldsen, the cathedral in Copenhagen. And we finally went there. Risen Christ from Copenhagen has little children all over the world, including the lobby of Johns Hopkins Hospital. So this is the Jesus I knew. Well, one of two. Ours was painted, so we had pale skin, almost blonde hair. Downstairs is where the real excitement was at Hope Church, because that's where we had church suppers. That's where people had their Cub Scout ceremonies. This is not a random person you see on the screen. That's me at the age of 11. You know, Charles Schultz. Okay. Anyway, my father took this photograph, and you can see that there is a painting, actually. It's a reproduction of a painting right behind me. And it seems to be talking in my ear. And that's no accident. My father thought and believed and hoped that Jesus would guide me in my life. As an expression of that belief, because it was good photography, made sure that Jesus was talking in his ear. I still don't hear so well. So I did a little research. You know, Ena mentioned 3 exhibitions. Last of the 3 icon shows in Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia right now, Jesus is black and has an afro. Interestingly enough, in the Middle Ages, he wasn't black, he was beige, and he didn't have an afro. But right now, he's black and has an afro. So I wanted the audience to get a sense of the question, color of Christ. Right? Reasonable question. And so I brought this one as the Christ I knew as a child. And I didn't have Google in those days, so I couldn't find out what color his eyes were. So I asked my mother, because she had one of these herself in her house, to send our Jesus to me in Baltimore. Sure enough, he had blue eyes, just like my father. And how convenient. Werner Sullivan painted this in 1940. And 500 million of these have been reproduced and or sold in the 20th century, in the 60 years of the 20th century, which means that Werner Sullivan Jesus has been reproduced more times than the Mona Lisa, the Guernica, and Michelangelo's David put together. Yes, wow. So here we are in a church with a Norwegian farm type on your left and a Swedish farmer type on the right, looking at Jesus. And who does Jesus look like? It looks like them. And who's Werner Sullivan? First generation Swede. So what I'm saying is 2 things, actually. One is that through the entire history of Christianity, Christians have made Jesus look like them. There are no descriptions of Jesus, no images of Jesus during the lifetime of the historical Jesus. First images of Jesus post-date Christ by 300 years. And St. Augustine, the wise man that he was, said that every Christian, as he reads the Gospels, will give a face to the players. That's the way we are. And we give the face to the players that belongs to us. But since we're made in the image of God, that all works out. It's perfect. Right? So that was Jesus that I knew as a kid. Then I went to college. You know, things change when you go to college. And I fell in love. 2 buildings. Actually, the first was on the left, Chartres Cathedral. How many have been to Chartres? I can tell you that with black and white photographs at Carleton College in Northfield, Minnesota, in the dead of winter, looking at photographs of this magnificent Gothic cathedral, I felt a sense of kind of spiritual rapture. I don't know if I'm a little odd in that respect, but I'm telling you the truth. Sometime after that, and again, before I actually went to Chartres, I became acquainted with the absolute contemporary, painted exactly the same time. Church on the right, and Daphne just outside of Athens, and I didn't know what was going to this. Oh! Three? Good for you.
It's my niece.
4, 3. Well, that's 2.7%. No. What I'm saying is that these 2 are exactly contemporary. Both cases, one Latin Catholic, the other Greek, Byzantine Orthodox. Both of them saw these spaces as a place where God would encounter people. People would encounter God. And in Chartres Cathedral, this happened through stained glass. And there he is in the rose window right at the center. One of the most magnificent creations in the history of Western culture. Absolutely, you cannot forget that. Once you enter that church and see the sun, especially in the afternoon. And in the Greek East, you wouldn't even think they belonged to the same religion. They do it in glass also, but in this case, it's glass that's layered with gold. Golden tesserae and mosaics. So in both cases, they're bringing the holy down to them in their version. My Warner Solomon blue-eyed Jewish Jesus. But for me, for reasons I can't fully explain, when I finally entered these two buildings, each chart is a specific example. When I walked through the door of Sharp Cathedral the first time in 1967, 21 years old. First time I've been here, and I walked through the door of that building in July, and it was sunny out. Walked through that door, initially, even in my young eyes of a 21-year-old, it's total darkness. Trying to adapt to what's going on inside the building, and gradually it comes to light. So gradually you can see the color on the floor. I can tell you that my experience of that space was so profound that it wasn't religious, but it partook in the same religious feeling. It's wonderful. That class as well as describe. And I have a word for that. I didn't invent it. It's called numinous. And that was in the title. And I bet you don't use that word commonly in your everyday conversation. And if you try to have a cocktail party this weekend, it gets you nothing but a blank stare. Luminous. It comes from Latin, 17th century adaptation of Latin. It means not your head. And a German theologian, philosopher, I think 1915, 1916, came up with this notion that there is a feeling that's irreducible, a feeling that is known to almost all mankind in one form or another, of being, of sensing you're in the presence of the Holy. And the nod is that the divine presence has such potency, all it needs to do is nod its head to make its wishes known. Does that make sense? So a numinous sense is mysterious and spiritual. And it leaves you at least slightly transformed. And I sensed that and felt that profoundly. And as I entered the museum world, I thought, why not make that art in that museum in Baltimore, the Walters Art Gallery, then, evoke a sense of the numinous people in this museum. That was my aim. Now, this was 1985. My track record was spotty. This was my first exhibition as a graduate student at Princeton. 63 Byzantine illuminated manuscripts in 48 cases. That exhibition was memorable for one thing that is revealed in this slide. Nobody showed up. I didn't have to wait for the galleries to clear to take this picture. So I got, there's nothing more enthusiastic and all-knowing than graduate students, right? And I was so full of myself. I learned to read Greek. I could read this scribbly stuff. And finally, I got a call that said a reporter from the Philadelphia Inquirer is coming to review the show. We were alone in the exhibition. For an hour and a half, I took him to each of the 48 cases and looked at each of the 63 books. And most of them were flaked away, so you couldn't even see what the hell was there once upon a time. And then I was waiting for the review. Now, every day, the Philadelphia Inquirer would arrive at Princeton at the drugstore right across from Nassau Hall. And I gave them 2 or 3 days. I figured they had to edit it. And then I get down to this drugstore at 8 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, right? And they dropped, the newspapers came a bus from Philadelphia, they tossed them onto the sidewalk. And they were banded, so it was hard to look through to see my review there. That went on for 4 weeks. I never got the review. Not only did nobody show up, I didn't get any press. Now, why should that be? I can tell you one reason. All we graduate students cared about was dating the book. Is it third quarter of the 11th century? The first quarter of the 12th? We would argue into the wee hours of the morning about which it was. Nobody cared. Nobody cared. And the light was all the same, and the books were flaky. You could see them, and the labels would fall, and the texture was like 12 points. And hell, I couldn't even read it at the age of 21. Right now, I couldn't even find the label in those cases. So, yes, I failed. I did better. My first wrote a role, which was called Silver Treasury from Ruin to Sand. Byzantine Empire, if you can set your mind in Constantinople and Istanbul, as you now say. And the Church of Hagia Sophia, the altar was made of solid gold, and there were like 40,000 pounds of silver. Tinsel, the kind of stuff you see at the end of the church on the altar. Imagine, a couple tons of that stuff. It was all stolen by the Fourth Crusaders in World War IV and melted down and turned into coins, which are probably still in circulation somewhere. But I'm telling you, this stuff is magnificent, very good survival. I got almost all of it survived, and put it at the Walters. Silver treasure from Ruin to Sand, and that's a chalice, holy communion wine, right? This is how we ordinarily showed it in the galleries. I used to say this is like going to George Jensen in New York. You can see the stuff, probably a set of spoons go with that. You get the bridal set and things with it all. So I wanted to bring it to life. So what did I do? What do you think I did? What would you do? I'll tell you what I did. I went to the local church, local Greek Orthodox church. I'm the Cathedral Denunciation president. Got friendly with the priest, Father Munoz, very close friend. And he let me behind the altar. I didn't go on there, but he let me back there for the service. And I brought a photographer. He took photographs. And I made a film. Go with the show. I did a film about how this was used, not only nowadays, but on the left here, you see that? That's an 11th century Byzantine manuscript. It shows a priest doing exactly the same thing. Change. This is one wonderful about Orthodoxy. The approach to Christianity right now is the same thing as in the 6th and 7th century. Absolutely the same. So, I did all that, made a little film, and then I did something a little strange. And I thought, people are going to laugh at me or not. I built a little church out of styrofoam and plywood. And it was so much fun. And I got an advisor from Dunbar Notes to tell me exactly the architecture of the church that this silver was archaeologically accurate. Trouble was, it was a foot too long. When we put it together, we tried to put it together in the gallery. It was a foot too long, couldn't squeeze it in. So they got the saw out and saw half an arch off. Styrofoam was very easy to deal with on that scale. And anybody know what this is? Anybody know what Paul Newman's first movie was? Oh, yeah. 1954, Silver Chalice. Paul Newman plays a Greek slave who, and this is based on a novel, which is based on what was then current belief in the 50s, that thing you see on the screen right there, with the light on it, it's a silver goblet thing. The images for 13 figures, one which is Christ and 12. It was believed at the time to be a container for the Holy Grail, the glass, that inside. Everybody believed that. And for that to be true, all those little portraits on the outside would have been done by somebody in the 1st century, which is 200 years earlier than any other picture of Christ. So here we have this magical object that Christ himself had touched, and better still, he touched the inside. Better still, his picture was on the outside. It was so marvelous. It was the subject of that movie, because Paul Newman was the guy who made the silver thing. And it was so expensive, nobody could buy a Holy Grail, right? So it was kept on Fifth Avenue in a bank, in a vault, from the kind of vault that has all this. And you can walk down Fifth Avenue, and there were two security guys standing next to it, and you could peer through the window of the bag, and you could sort of see this thing in there. Metropolitan Museum eventually bought it, and there it is. Well, we had a fellow working on this, and she figured out that wasn't a chalice at all, it's a lamp. And it certainly isn't first century, it's 6th century. And it doesn't come from Jerusalem, it comes from Syria. We knew all of that, the label said that. We're honest people, right? But I put at the top of the label, chalice? Holy Grail, question mark. And not only that, I put it all alone in the first gallery. The first gallery was very dark except for sepia pictures of ancient churches. You walk in the first gallery, in one case in the first gallery, it was dark and sort of like that, and the case is taller than all the rest. So even a tall person has to look up. Marvelous object. And what's happening? Remember that movie I made? I had Byzantine chant running through the entire length of that movie. So you're coming onto this thing, it says, Holy Grail. You hear Byzantine chant. People were mesmerized. Plus, I got a very nice review in the New York Times.
Did you call that reporter back up and say, hey, you did the New York Times?
No, I just had given up on it. And I was back when I moved down to Minnesota. And the then museum director called me on Sunday morning and said, we're in the New York Times. I totally forgot about it. Yeah. So a couple years later, I did an exhibition, Holy Image, Holy Space, which I still am very, very proud of. It was the first major icon show in the United States. And I'll get to icons in just a moment, but this is the key object, and it's a 4-foot-high icon from Athens. Once upon a time in Thessaloniki, from around the year 1400. It's Christ's wisdom of God. And he holds his hand in blessing, and he holds his book, which is his wisdom, his left hand. It's a version of a very common image of Christ. And that was our work. And by the way, there's something very different between a chalice and an icon. Chalice holds communion wine. Utilitarian in a very obvious and almost mundane way. Sure, it's part of the liturgy, and the liturgy is the second question. But in terms of your experience of it and reconstructing an experience of it, very different from an icon. An icon is a spiritual object which can only be understood in a spiritual way. Yes, you take the icon and reconstruct the setting that it occupies in the church, and I did that. That was sort of the equivalent of a little church I built outside. But an icon is much, much more than where it is, what it shows. An icon, in Greek, the word icon simply means image. It's not a technical term at all. It applies to an image in a comic. Icon, to us, most people who tall people or Orthodox, is something much more specific, namely a sacred image. Now, you're seeing 3 icons of Christ here. One is the fairly typical kind that kind of you most often think about, namely a holy figure with a wooden pen. The figure has big eyes. He's look, he or she can be a virgin child, can be scores of saints, but they almost always are looking upward toward you. Eyes are really important. Making some gesture that invites conversation or implies conversation. And they have a sense of authority, and all extraneous outside information is gone. That's where mosaic is great, because it's just reflecting gold. Everything that's you've left time, no longer caught, all somewhere else, gone somewhere else. So an icon can be anything from a coin, mass-produced, that gold coin that I hold up, to a mosaic, top of the church, coffee, which I show. Put the coin on the nose of Jesus in the mosaic, and you couldn't even see the coin. Or it could be a panel painting like that. These 3 objects are separated. The Christ figure is around 600, the coin is around 700, the mosaic is around 1200. Now look at the mosaic, for example, in relationship to that to that coin. They're separated by 500 years. Look at the book. Look at the right hand. Right hand is like in a sling. You see what I'm saying there? Got sort of caught up in the road. Icons seem never to change. And that's why a lot of things are now boring. You've seen one icon, you've seen them all. Icons do things. Talk. An icon is, in the kind of metaphor of orthodoxy, a window or a door. So you can almost imagine that for those who believe in icons and practice them, that all the saints, Christ, Mary, and child exist in some metaphysical capacity. It's time to go and read them, have a conversation, spiritual engagement. Go to that spot and open the door. In a way, it's like a telephone, old-fashioned kind. It sits on a table, nothing. When it's time to talk. And the Orthodox are very clear on something. The icon is a representation and a place of meeting with the divine, but it's not one and the same. If it were, if you were to take a piece that wood on the icon and chew it, you would be adjusting something tantamount to the Greeks were very clear on distinguishing, as they still are, between the prosopon, which is Greek for face, zeal, or essence. An icon is not the essence of the divine, the face of the divine. As the face of the divine is the place of interaction and meeting. Sort of like a mirror. Look in a mirror, you see the image. The mirror does not contain the essence of us. Icons are those. And they're two-way streets. Icons do things. You can't be sure when they're going to do something. This is a mid-15th century battle between the Novgorodians on the left and the Suzdalians on the right. These are North Russians who didn't get along so well, and the Suzdal army is attacking Novgorod city walls. You can see the city walls there. Yeah. City walls. They're shooting their arrows, and what are their arrows intersecting with? The Virgin of Stalin sees the Nazis. Right? What does he do? He takes Our Lady of Vladimir. Puts her in a helicopter. Flies her over. This atheist debate. Protecting the city walls from the Nazis. Boris Yeltsin, August 1991. Image of him during the White Revolution. He's on an army tank. So icons project a door that's two ways. Goes toward us, goes from us. You've got to take an icon on its own terms. It's a conversation. And believe it or not, now is the first chance you get. He's such a appearance in the box. Hope you do well. Flex poorly on you if you Okay. An iconic encounter, right? You see it in a medieval manuscript on the left, you see the icon on the right. Question is, by the way, icons can react differently. You feel bad about yourself, right? You go to your teacher and you haven't done your homework. I still got things like that. And the teacher seems angry. The teacher doesn't have the information that you haven't done your homework. But you know that it's out. So you project your failure against the teacher. So the same thing with Christ. Christ can be mad at you or can be pleased with you. And I will propose to you all that in this one face, Jesus allows for each of those two different reactions, depending on where you are. And by the way, there's a Greek passage, Greek text that isn't text. Somebody standing on the floor, docking, looking up, And saying, in essence, for those who are reproached by their own judgment, bad about themselves, he is wrathful and hostile. Those who are relieved, he is joyful. Okay? So what that person is telling you, he's looking up in the dome of the church, year 1200 roughly, and he's saying, that thing talks back to me. Nothing's changed. But in fact, he's talking back to me in two different ways, depending on how I feel. 2 different days, we have 2 different times. So the question is, how many see joyful welcoming Jesus? Raise your hand. You have to raise your hand. I'm doing all the work here. Come on. How many see a joyful welcoming Jesus? Only 2 people. How many see a wrathful and hostile Jesus? Don't be so shy. I can't see so.
Like he's wanting to know a concern.
Does this help? Proper left side, which is sinister, Latin. You know, in the Last Judgment in medieval art, you don't simply go down the hill, you go down and take a left. The sinister side of Christ's face, eyebrows arched, cheek in shadow, almost a sneer on the lips. The other side of the face, slightly catatonic. You know, just blank. So, see what I'm saying? Whichever side of that face you go to is the side that will mean the most to you at that moment. That fantastic artist. To separate the two. Now, he just didn't make that up. Nor did Harrison Ford make it up. Everybody has a bifurcated face. When I was doing this, yeah, exactly. I see somebody first row doing this and this, right? All of them. So I've given this talk since before some of you were born. And this went on for a long time. And finally, some guy who was a neuroscientist, concept I didn't even know at the time, from the Menninger Clinic in Bend, Kansas, got up and he said in the Q&A, don't you know that all faces are emotively bifurcated? That there are people getting high school yearbooks, you know, those kind of mugshots straight on. By the age of 18, your face is beginning to show muscular changes. Harrison Ford, again, sinister side, he looks a little pissed off. And then slightly catatonic on the other side. Harrison Ford bifurcated. Look at Ronald Reagan. I wonder if everything I said is delusional. Check out Ronald Reagan's face. Check out your own face. The face of Jesus was created by somebody who understood the reality of how our faces work. And was putting that reality to good effect in making the icon dialogue. Okay? So, knowing all of that, how did I treat holy image in holy place? I took the biggest icon in the exhibition, 4 feet tall, put it at the end of a hallway that was about 2/3 of the length from here to that wall. And again in the exhibition, you had to go down that hallway. The walls were deep blue. The lighting was so low that you almost had to feel your way along the wall. And again, I did the movie that went with the show, and the theater was just to the left. But as you walk toward this icon, hearing Byzantine chant, and I put the icon lower than normal, so that a person who was 5'4" lined up with the eyes of Jesus. And they couldn't tell. They had to assume there was some way to get into the exhibition. They couldn't tell if you went around this wall and opened up the exhibition. So everybody went into that show, and it was packed. Everybody had to walk down that aisle, face Jesus on his terms. And the message I was giving them was, In this space, Jesus is in charge. And I don't care if you're Orthodox, I don't care if you're Catholic or Protestant, Jewish or Hindu, it makes no difference. Numinous is sectarian. What's so wonderful about it from my point of view, I don't know, the Orthodox are so warm about this show. It's that you've given us words to express what we believe and do. They were brought up doing this as natural, but they never thought about it until they saw this exhibition. And by the way, I work with the Orthodox community all the time. So you walk down the thing, you hear the music. No, there was no incense. I thought of it. And Jesus is in charge. Oh yeah. 2 weeks ago, I was in Carnegie Hall. How many have been in Carnegie Hall? 2,800 people fit in that building. 5 stories up to the balcony. I took this where my wife and I were sitting 2 weeks ago, a little less than 2 weeks ago. You hear this Icelandic pianist play the Goldberg variations. When the concert is about, by the way, you don't look while he's playing. This little brochure that says Goldberg, guy who went to sleep. Bach was a guy who made some money by selling music. By the way, this was done in 1787, whatever. You don't go to that space to get a lesson who Goldberg or Bach or the variations are. And you don't even care at the moment who Olsen is spectacular or Bach. You are there to have an experience. And museums are about experience. I don't know why it is that people just don't get that. Sure, they're educational institutions, but in a way, the education is secondary. If you have an experience, aesthetic, luminous, combination of both, you have something that sticks with you. Because it sticks with you. You want to find out who Goldberg is or who Olsen is, you Google them when you get home. And that will fit into a little box of knowledge that you want to have because you have a good experience. Anyway, when he's about to play, 2,800 people are sitting there. They didn't literally lock the doors, but you cannot, nobody can come in when he touches the piano. And the acoustics in Carnegie Hall are perfect. The piano looked like a little toy down there. And when we began to play it, it was as if he was playing for me. The lights were low, and so when I say museums and the numinous, and you could drop the word aesthetic, it should work like the acoustics focus of the musical event. Musical events are intensely emotional. People stand up, I mean, this guy got it done. 75 minutes, nonstop. But he got it done. 2,800 people instantly stood up. Now, that doesn't happen in a museum exhibition. You know, not a million people will come, and they vote with their feet, but they don't vote by whistling and saying, bravo, and bravo, Vikan, you did great on this show. It's much better than Princeton in 73. You make progress. So, what I'm saying is, and it mystifies me how elusive this concept seems to be in the museum world, because I tried to beat it into the heads of the curators, and they were resistant to that, is that we're an experience business. Except we provide a good experience, education will come. So how do we know if we did well? Well, everything in the show, except for one object, was covered with plexiglass. All these things came from Greece, and we had to keep it. We had this special cleaner stuff, not Windex, you had to have something else. And the security officers were constantly going through the galleries with this Windexy stuff. Why? The people were kissing plexiglass. Especially if it's in red lipstick. You know, sounds sacrilegious. It was quite wonderful. We had this one guy called the Coke bottle eyes because he had glasses that were like bottoms of Coke bottles. We were free on Wednesdays. We're free all the time now, but then we were free on Wednesdays. He'd bring one of these little seats that you have on the golf course, you know, that are free things with a little canvas lid. And he'd sit down on Wednesdays, it was free, in front of one icon. And just sit there. For the entire, I guess he went to the bathroom, but he was there all the time. So the show went to Miami. And I was in a room, dark, with slides. And as I finally adjusted my vision, I looked down at the us. Same guy. He fought, the expedition went to 8 cities. This guy, who never spoke a word to me, or vice versa, went to 8 different cities to see the same thing. But it was one icon. After the best one in the show, we had very good taste. Anyway, at the end of the show, we had 3 autographs. You might know that autograph started to stay as an icon painter on the island of Crete. There are a couple of icons that apparently were painted by him, not so great. Walters had a wonderful St. Francis. St. Francis, biographer, the stigmata of Christ, right? You see it on the left. And it's a great painting, and it's been in Walters since 1934 and so on. One of the stars in the Renaissance gallery is fine. And I thought, well, people ought to get a sense of what a record will look like. But, right? So they could make a compare and contrast. Well, the opening day was a Sunday, and I remember I probably was home at that time, and somebody called me from the security staff and said, this is St. Francis's hand. Well, that's canvas. There was no question about it. Forget the fact he's the most Catholic of Catholic saints. St. Francis was empowered by the numinous quality of his names. It's quite amazing. Anyway, bestseller, rather good seller, was written by this woman, Francesca Matthews Green. It was also an icon movie, and she converted to Orthodox in front of that icon on the right, in our gallery. That happened to be the same icon that Mr. Cook glasses, parking himself in front of. It's from my mind, this icon. But in any event, she wrote a book, Facing East, and sold a lot. It's in his 3rd picture. Water conversion. She started as a Baptist, became an Episcopalian when she got married. Went to the Walters to see icons, became Orthodox Creed. Then she and her husband also converted, founded a small parish just outside of Baltimore. So yeah. I did three icon shows in 5 years. Byzantine, Russian. We went to 18 cities and received 500,000. The Russian show, which was the best of the 3, went to Princeton, where I had my family in 1973. It went to Princeton in 1993. Exactly 20. The highest attended in the history. So, it's been changed. Now, you are on the hot seat, or the catbird seat, right? Ready? Okay. Now I'm getting slightly technical. My retirement, actually, I guess before I retired, I became quite taken with drawing. And as a new kind of discipline invented really in the late 1990s. And scientists using one of them. And it's the whole question, the intersection between brain science and art experience. There are a few people that practice it. It's at its beginnings. It's interesting. A friend of mine, John Hopkins, did experiments with jazz pianists. And he put them in fMRIs with plastic pianos. And when they played off sheet music, one part of the brain lit up. They improvised, another part of the brain lit up. Now, that may seem like a small step for mankind in terms of understanding the aesthetic experience. But it did help to begin to understand getting in the groove. You get in the groove, the front of your head stops. And that is the part of your brain that controls and represses, makes you behave yourself. But when you get past that, that's where a jazz pianist, he put a political cartoonist, Pal, in the thing, and he did cartoons. He copied them, and then he did them improvised. And he did a hip hop artist that same way. So that's the kind of things that's going on. Anyway, I learned about the lateralization of the brain, and you probably all at some form about this notion that motion exists here and numbers exist here, and that's oversimplification. But it does hit on a basic fact that we process emotions in this hemisphere of our brain. And this hemisphere of our brain, which is the part that monkeys will tell you to run, right? Emotional peak. controls this ear and your vision in the visual field. So, understand this, believe it if you choose. You hear bad news emotionally more potently because it goes to your right hemisphere. Seems strange. Here's what it does in vision. I'm blind in one eye, but it still works for me because right half, my right eye, is governed by this part of my brain. You see that? See the red and the green. The red is the left visual field, green is the right visual field. Left visual field is that part of your field of vision. One eye or two, makes no difference. And is most sensitive to, is best at reading emotion. Okay? That makes sense? So, there are people who study this and study it affect things in the world. For example, left-hand cradle. The idea being that a mother will cradle a child on the left side because her left field of vision, left field bias, which reads emotion, better reading the emotion in the child's face. You might know what you're all thinking. You hold the bottle in your right hand. And as I've been at home, I'm going to show you a picture of this. I phone right now. My daughter has a 2-month-old baby. Guess what? Cradling the baby here, feeding it left hand. So this is one idea. Cradle a child on the left because your left visual field bias better at reading what's going on in this child. For what it's worth, look at this. How many people see a difference in those? Now, when you vote, you know, I'm not taking attendance. This is pass fail. How many people see these faces as emotionally different? Raise your hand, please. Okay. So these are not the same emotionally. They look different. Right? Okay. Well, they do experiments with this. The people that I'm talking about, the neuroscientists who are interested in how our brains work through our eyes to understand emotion, right? Well, they don't actually show them side by side because that screws up your left field bias. You'll naturally go to the left side. So what do? They stack them. Now, you can quibble with me until the cows come home. That's a Minnesota expression. Until the cows come home, you can quibble with me about whether angrier is the right word. But I'm after which of these two images, one of which is obviously first left to right, you find most emotionally powerful. And I'm very clear. I'm on top. Yes. These are not exactly, if you see them, it's exactly the same activity. But I'm going to tell you is that I'm inviting you to nuance your thinking and to ask yourself, does one of these look a little more angry than the other? Just a smidgen, just a teeny bit.
Are you left-handed? Thinking is everything you know.
Okay, how many think the top one is angrier than the bottom one? How many think the bottom one is angrier than the top one? Most of them, most of you, by a ratio of at least 6-4 or 7-3, say the top one is angrier. I'm not putting words into your hands. That's what I'm reading. Okay? What I'm telling you is, right-handed people see the top one is angry. Why? Reverse left to right, and your left visual field bias will read the angry side of the face with greater intensity.
So repeat that last line.
I gotta look at what I'm saying here. Yeah. Okay, the top one. To me, I'm right-handed. Top one looks angry, clearly angry. Bottom one looks a little more benign. I'm hearing that 7 out of 10 of you agree with me. How many think the bottom angry? You're ambidextrous. You're left-handed. That tends to be true. I've done this half dozen times. And the answer is, I was just saying, yes, most people can see differentiation. Right? Yes, most of them can see that differentiation. So privilege, the left side of the face, which is the reversed image, which means if you boil it down to the arch circa 600 AD, he's doing you a favor. Most of his friends are right-handed, right? So if you really wanted to scare the bejesus out of you, you would have reversed it. And Christ would have been angry all of the time instead of some of the time. I shouldn't have to argue with my wife, should I?
The sinister side was supposed to be the left side.
It
His left side.
is. On the whole side. That's his sinister side. But I'm telling you, the right-hander, we privilege the benign side.
That's his right side on, from this point. But from our point, okay. Okay.
Now you're thinking about unity. Thank you.
That's the next year.
This is the first time I've talked to live bodies and agents. Thank you for the questions.
I think that, you're talking about it's made me think of why people have a good side and a bad side.
Oh, that's exactly right. And Reagan, who was it? Some famous person made very clear which side they could not be photographed on because of that side. Angry. But we all have that bifurcation. Yeah.
I could not decide because it was anger. There was a variation in the kind of anger. It was cold.
Hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. You're right here.
I'm left-handed.
Okay, that makes some sense. I like this. What I like about this experiment, I want to be told about the ego. I absolutely believe what I say is true. Why? Because I read it in some fancy journal by neuroscientists, but also because I see it myself. And when I first did it, I was absolutely astounded. I would notice that, and then I was disappointed. I remember being on the phone with this neuroscientist at the Cleveland Clinic. And he said, hold it here, time out. The sinister side actually is the side that left-handed would find troublesome, but most right-handed people are going to be looking at the benign and almost catatonic side. So I can only conclude that the icon cancer somehow came to this. That's a pretty aggressive icon. It is a hot icon among my group. But within its hotness.
But the neuroscience or the brains or the scientists are putting the spirituality of the icon. Well, in a way, aren't they? Because if you look at him and you think like, that everybody's got a good side and a bad side and you react differently, that's kind of norm. But I think what people for a long time thought was exceptional about that, with Jesus, is that indeed he's got sides. And what you're saying at the beginning, it reflects how you, the worshiper, right, look at the.
So it's both true physiologically and neurologically, right? And it's also effective in terms of the spiritual dynamic. Is that fair to say? Yeah. So now, the guy who founded aesthetics, says, artists are intuitive neuroscience. They actually are efficient, without words, without theological knowledge, for nothing. And so this person, it was a man, that was after something. The thing that he was after was true in nature, but he exaggerated it, made it work more effectively. Having said that, how should we cover it like that? So I would give this talk, and eventually this bifurcated face was on the internet. You know, I mean, it went everywhere because once you see it, you can't get it out of your head. It's astounding. And I'd give this talk, and then people would go out of the exhibit, go back to the icon exhibition, like this. Expecting and disappointed they couldn't find anybody else talking with two tongues. So yes, I think he's an extraordinary icon, but he's not all by himself. This view of Jesus Christ, you know, he has little descendants going down through time. So it's quite an extraordinary creation.
Are there images of religion? Are there images of religion that you say a personification of
That's a good question. I gave this talk at the Rollins Museum of Art at a conference where Thomas, part of the conversation, exploring the dynamic between thing and no. Don't see it sometimes. Yeah.
I'm just curious. Just a brief story. A few years ago, there was an exhibition, the Stafford Gallery, carrying up a Mark Rothko painting. Amazing experience where a visitor walked in behind me and started to pray in that exhibition. And it was quite transformational for me. And I'm wondering what has been the most surprising thing that's happened to students and the visitors that studied in these exhibitions. What are the reactions beyond maybe the kissing of St. Francis?
Well, it did surprise me. I mean, I thought my business was trying to evoke the dynamic, the real historical dynamic of the icon. Under the heading of you can't fully understand an icon unless you understand how it works. You know, if you went to a car exhibition and you were born like 5,000 years ago and you looked at this shiny metal thing, and all this thing for, you want to drive it to find out what it's for, right? So, in a way, we're trying to try the icon. So we understand the icon, right? So you're talking about Rothko having a spiritual experience. So in the olden days, I worked for Dominique Demenil in Houston. Dominique Demenil built the Rothko Chapel. Now, she was quite an extraordinary. She's a multi-valent spiritualist. She understands the numinous cross-culturally. And if you go into that chapel, you're in a chapel that has the appearance of a Christian religious location. You're seeing these enormous rosters, purples and blacks and who knows what else on the wall. And people sit on these stone benches, seemingly for eternity, because whatever's happening in there doesn't work for me, I can tell you that. It works for a lot of people. So I mean, she understood that. I'm sorry.
No, there's just a question.
Yes.
I have a question. Tying what you described in your talk as sort of the juxtaposition or binary, perhaps, in curation between creating an experience for the visitor versus the educational part, right? And here we curate a lot of our exhibitions with education at the forefront. Right. And thinking about the exhibition in the gallery at Solar Transformations, which is addresses spirituality and I wonder what your thoughts are in the ways in which, one of the ways in which we thought about activating some of the religious works from eras past, was to put them in dialogue with contemporary work and offering that point of entry for our visitors, for our students, and also for our general audiences here at the museum. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that type of tutorial from.
I mean, the juxtaposition of things more familiar with things not familiar.
Right, versus the experience, to elicit that kind of curiosity and then the education.
Yeah, no, that clearly works, and we did a lot of that. The silver treasure, we actually had a contemporary artist who was making liturgical objects out of tinfoil. And it drove the Orthodox nuts. And timid as I was, I put that off to the side. So I take the tours of the Orthodox movement, the priests and all the rest of them, I take them into the show without them seeing the tinfoil chalices over there. They were a way to make that work. I never gave up on the academic connection. I was fussy for the third quarter, 11th century, first quarter, 12th century distinction. I lived, ate, and breathed that stuff. Right now, if you hold up a Byzantine manuscript, no pictures, I can date it within 100 years. I don't know if that's any good to anybody. I care about it. So the first show, Holy Image, Holy Space, review, above the fold, big review in the New York Times. First line was, Holy Image, Holy Space is a good exhibition after readers. And the reviewer, who was a very smart guy, drew the distinction between the numinous, he didn't use that word, but all of the descriptions were descriptors of the numinous experience. He said, and then you arrive in the next room and you see the labels. And that's third quarter, 11th century, first quarter of the 12th, you know. And he says, it's this kind of schizophrenia experience. And I could never give that up. So I tried, my point of entry was really the films. And these shows in those days cost us $250,000. We were a little place with an $8 budget, so we paid attention, right? And we got NEH money for every one of them. And I would spend at least $40,000 sending people to Greece, Russia, to Ethiopia, make films on site, real people using those objects. So my point of entry was really kind of a Rick Steves. Remember him? Rick Steves? So the idea was to put you on the ground in Athens, or actually in the monastery closest to the house. We went to Chartres Cathedral. That was a lot of money to pay people. We loved it. I wrote all the scripts, and we were very fussy about the music. You know, we had to have Byzantine music in the 6th century, 12th century. So the academic bias was always there, but the point of entry was getting on this teacher.
My background is medicine. And when I look at those icons, I think of someone who had a neurological condition called Bell's palsy.
Bell's palsy from the front row here.
Could it not be that Jesus did have that, and somebody walked and they heard about that, and then they painted him with Bell's palsy? I mean, does that ever happen? Is that well?
It deserves some careful thought. So I gave this talk one time, and it's like very about one time, and the guy raised his hand and we could talk. I'm a doctor. When that happens, you know there's going to be problems. I'm a doctor, he said, and I showed him a picture of her. And she had what do you call that? Yeah. And he says, I bet she's from Cyprus. They don't have any iodine or salt in Cyprus. And sure enough, I looked up goiters, and she looked just like she had a goiter. I'm fussed. I tend to doubt that it's true because it has no utility as far as Christ having some neurological disorder. If somebody else, some people don't even think Christ existed. Let's assume there was a real person who walked around, right? Footprints. And he didn't feel better, let's say so in the gospel. He was alcohol. Why not? So if he did have a disease, he couldn't see himself. So I believe that it deserves more thought.
But that is it's a simple virus that eventually goes away.
Oh, that's right.
So.
No, I get it. In the front row.
I'm thinking about Joel's idea of the luminous,
Yeah.
where he talks about when you're in that space,
Yeah.
there's the greater communio, meaning that all offices have merged.
Yeah.
And I was wondering how you feel.
Well, I think that's exactly correct. You've done your homework. Are you really academic?
Well, I've just done, yeah, I guess in a way.
Yeah. Because the guy who made working as or used to circle academics, just thought of transcendence and caring any sort, which sense of the whole. So it's a very elegant and irreducible. In other words, it's not a subcategory of something else. It's all by itself. Purely aesthetic. So I don't know, it'd be fun, and I proposals for happen. Because you can create an environment that's sort of like virtual realities. And create a virtual reality going to try to and just see what that would be. But we never got any information.
It's a good point. Did you ever come to some conclusion? Staring at the icon that points at.
Oh, you mean the guy with the ball glass?
Yes.
No, just sort of disappeared. I assumed he was a lay monk. He had a very monastic book about it. Name was like, look, I should need it. But he was very sweet. It was kind of creepy film. Anyway, thank you all for coming.